Hi, everybody. My name is Leia Swanberg, and I am the owner of Canadian Fertility Consulting and Egg Helpers. Today, I am so excited to be sharing with you updates on the immigration process for those of you who live abroad or in the US and are planning a surrogacy journey in Canada. So, today we have some amazing guests who are going to share their expertise with you on the process of coming to Canada to create your embryos to move forward with surrogacy. So as always on these COVID-19 related webinars, today is November 9th, and all information is only for today's date. This situation is very fluid, as those of you around the world know, and so this information changes quite quickly. Also, please know that this is not, the information given today is not to be used as legal advice, and it is so important that you connect with Spiegel or Hope Springs Fertility Law for further information on the COVID-19 situation as it comes to your legal process and moving forward with your journey to parenthood. So a little background that I would love to share. Green and Spiegel and Hope Springs Fertility Law jumped in a moment that I was not sure that jumping in was possible in the way that they did, but they worked diligently, and an exemption has been created to allow for all people coming to Canada to become parents to arrive in Canada safely to wait for the birth of their children. Every one of our clients and other agencies within Canada's clients have arrived in time, have had a seamless process to arriving through the exemption and support received by Green and Spiegel. So it has absolutely been amazing to watch. We are now in what I would call a lull. We are now going into the phase of COVID-19 where clinics were closed for 3 months. And so now we are seeing, for the next 3 months, there won't be babies coming for international clients. So what better time than to create a new exemption? What better time than to figure out this new normal, which has unfortunately locked international and US travelers out of Canada. And so I'm going to have Cindy Wasser of Hope Springs Fertility Law, Alexandra Cole and Stephen Green of Green and Spiegel walk you through the exemption, walk you through the process of how you will be able to travel to Canada to leave your sperm, or travel to Canada to go through the egg retrieval process in order to get started with your journey quite quickly. And then as a follow-up and at the end, we're going to have Keren from Create Fertility Center and Babies Come True talk about another option, which is shipping your sperm from your country of origin, which is as well a great option for many people. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, who's going to share a little bit of history with you and go through how her and Stephen Green's office are working together on this.
Thank you so much, Leah. It's always a pleasure doing these webinars and being able to address so many people that have been making nonstop inquiries of us. And I must say, as proud as I am of the work that we've done since March when all this began, I couldn't do it without my remarkable team at Hope Springs Fertility Law. So a real shout out to all of them who are working tirelessly on the files and managing the work so that I could continue to do this with our government and, of course, with the remarkable team at Green and Spiegel. So just a little bit of the legal background and of what the plan is for moving forward. When COVID hit us in March, we were told by our government that there would be travel restrictions and bans. The restriction applies to the US people entering Canada, and the ban was for foreigners. And over time, a number of exemptions have developed, and Alex and Stephen will be addressing those as well. But briefly, The first crisis for all of us was those of our clients, foreigners and Americans, who were expecting babies through surrogacy in the next few days, weeks, and months. We, of course, never dreamed in March we'd still be doing this months later. So the initial ability to do this involved essentially 5 departments of our government. Transport Canada in charge of planes. Most people really don't know how much is involved in shutting down international airports and getting planes out so that people could be here. Secondly, global affairs, because we thought that this would have an outreach to the international community, and we needed our government to be able to speak with other governments to make sure that people could come back and forth. Immigration Canada, enormous. They were pretty much in charge of letting people in and then getting them out again. And finally, Health Canada, because we saw this as a health issue. And then a part of immigration is border control, and those are the people at our borders, and they must have a certain amount of independence and freedom to make decisions in the normal course. So we had to work with all of those people, and in the first 9 days, it was kind of harrowing getting this all going. And so one morning, after not sleeping for several nights, I had the brainstorm of course, I needed Stephen Green. Green and Spiegel is the oldest immigration firm and phenomenal immigration firm with so much political clout as well as immigration wisdom and skills. And so I contacted Stephen, tried to explain this to him, and he was on it in a nanosecond. And we have been cooperating nonstop since March to develop legal avenues, with me explaining fertility law, surrogacy, and him giving back the immigration components. And his fantastic associate, Alexandra, who you're going to meet, has been managing most of these files. And so we couldn't do it without them. And also, I need to thank so many of my colleagues who participated so much in working out little bits and pieces of this, particularly back in March and April when we were all so busy doing the major exemptions. So, as Leia said, we've had 100% success of getting parents into the country for the birth of their baby. I couldn't thank our government enough for supporting this process, for being there for the Canadian babies. And now, as Leia said, we need to think about the future, as we know COVID is here for a while. Even though there's good news this morning of vaccines, it won't be available for the general public, I'm sure, for some time. So Create Fertility Center and Near with Babies Come True have been amazing at developing a sperm kit, and you're going to hear about that at the end. And that is a phenomenal option for many, many people. But it doesn't address everyone's concerns, namely women who need to be here to donate eggs. We have egg donors all over the world who need to come to Canada to donate. And so we needed a process that allowed them into the country, and one that was perhaps slightly more formal than just come in for an essential purpose and hope you get in with a medical letter. And it also needed to be available for sperm donors for whom the kit isn't an option, or for those who just want to be here. And so as things have progressed, Health Canada and Immigration Canada have been working tirelessly here to develop more and more exemptions for travel restrictions. And there are 2 major ones that we're looking at to use here, and Alex has been developing with me so that we could make it more formal. And she's going to give you the details. But essentially, we need the cooperation of your clinic. So what is a major requirement, of course, is that the doctor at your clinic participate by signing a medical form. And before you move mountains to come here, you need to make sure your clinic is on board, and I'm thrilled to say that Create will be, and others. And then we also, for one portion of this, need to consider whether you in fact have a surrogate or a donor here that you need to support. And so you're going to need the cooperation of your agency, and you're going to need some legal advice to begin this process. So what Leia and I would like to offer is a process where you connect with us and we do a brief consultation to give you the overview of this and have you retain Green and Spiegel, and we help coordinate all of that and then introduce you to them. And that way you have full legal and agency support through this process, and of course the support of your clinic. And that way, should there be any complication whatsoever in you coming here, you have the support of Green and Spiegel to make sure that you can get over the border, and you'll have all of the backing of your team players. This is really critical because this is not as formal an exemption as for those of you who are having babies. The other thing I want to point out is some of you live in countries that still require you to get permission to leave, like Australia, for example. This is only the Canadian portion, so you're still going to have to come here from your country, get permission to leave if you have that kind of restriction. And at the moment, I'm not sure that Australia would provide you permission. So the sperm kit will still be very, very important for Australians, but we'll help you and coordinate with the legal teams there and the immigration people there to see if it will develop with us. The other part of this is that it's important to know that there's still a 14-day quarantine period in Canada. Now, that can be replaced where rapid testing is available, which at the moment is only at the Calgary airport. When you get the results of the rapid testing, as long as it's negative, of course, you don't have to do the 14-day quarantine. We are being told that this will roll out shortly to Toronto and possibly Vancouver as well, and Alex and Stephen will talk more about that. But even if you don't have to quarantine for 14 days, it's important to know that clinics have restrictions for the health and safety of their staff and the gametes. So there has to be a process in place for the clinic, which will involve either a 14-day quarantine anyway, or the retrieval of the sperm and blood at the hotel that you would be staying at once you're allowed to leave the airport. So that's pretty much what I have to say about the overview of the legal system. We are working tirelessly. At this point, I want to turn it over to my dear colleagues, Stephen and Alex, who have been so amazing through this, and I can't say enough. You got to have them on mute.
Great. Thank you so much, Cindy. And, you know, it's really interesting to hear you talk and to hear Leia talk, how this really is a team effort. And I think it's so important to express to people out there that it is a team. You've got really the experts from all areas involved in this whole process that are able to help you through it. And, you know, once again, it's nice to see such great teamwork. So what Alex and I are going to talk about today is just to go over the general travel ban, talk a little bit about quarantine, intending parents that are wanting to come here, then donors, and the fact that it's very, very fluid, this whole situation. So what Alex and I are telling you, at least from an immigration standpoint or border services officer standpoint, is the law currently this morning in Canada. It could change in the afternoon. So it's very important that whatever process you're involved in, that you confirm with Cindy, Leia, ourselves as to, hey, we're planning on coming to Canada tomorrow. We've got all the appropriate documentation. We've got the clinic set up. We've got our quarantine plan. We've got everything ready to go. Has anything changed? So it's very important that everyone understands that. So as Cindy indicated, as a result of COVID, Canada introduced a travel ban. And it's important for everyone to recognize that Canada divided the world up as to the requirements with respect to exemptions from the travel ban. And what they did was they said the law is different for those people currently in the United States and people currently outside of the United States. And quite candidly, there is more of a facilitative mode with respect to exempting people from the travel ban if they happen to be in the United States. And it's really interesting. I mean, if you look at the statistics with respect to COVID, you see that the United States is one of the most infected countries of the world, yet Canada has made the determination to change the rules for individuals in the United States. So you keep hearing me say individuals in the United States. So it's not based on your nationality. It's based on where you are necessarily located when we're talking about individuals that want to take advantage of some of the exemptions in the United States and coming into Canada. So just be aware of that. And again, Alex will talk about what those actual exemptions are, and in a general way, the process of individuals that want to come into Canada for the purposes of being in Canada for the birth of their child. The quarantine. Cindy, made a very important statement that Alex and I, or even the Canadian government, may help you with respect to how the quarantine affects you personally. Do you really have to wait 14 days? Is there an exemption from the 14 days? Is there this rapid testing available? But your clinic may be different. So yes, we'll tell you the law with respect to quarantining in Canada, but the place in which you may be going, that is the clinic, may have a totally different policy, and you must, check that out with Cindy and Leia as to how that works. So the quarantine. Canada indicates that everyone entering must quarantine for a minimum of 14 days. Anyone now coming to Canada must also download a certain app which will help the Canadian government in contact tracing, and will also help them with respect to you as a person entering Canada will be monitored. So the Canadian government has introduced this app that requires you to self-monitor, to tell the government what's going on. So it's important that you understand that concept. So you must download that application. It will facilitate your entry into Canada with respect to the specific quarantining. Cindy mentioned this special exemption from quarantining in the sense of a reduced amount of time that you have to quarantine, which was introduced about 2 weeks ago. And you can see how quickly things move in one of our provinces called Alberta, where you arrive at the Calgary airport. And there's a process for rapid testing, and you must quarantine until you get your results. But the government has indicated in Alberta that you will get your results within 48 hours, and then you are free to travel within the province of Alberta, and you are required to take a further test. And once you have completed that, then you are eligible to, be on your way. The other provinces like Ontario, like British Columbia, are looking into the same type of rapid testing and limiting the amount of quarantine necessary, because they feel that it's really giving that particular province, Alberta, an advantage both from a business perspective and for people, to come to that area. So that's why the other provinces are looking at it. However, as I stated from the beginning, the situation is very fluid. And we were advised that the province of Ontario would be coming out with their rapid, testing and limiting the amount of quarantine by the middle of this month. But now we've been told they're delaying that because they're concerned about the holiday season and they don't want to limit quarantining prior to the holiday season. So in Ontario, you may now see it pushed back to the beginning of January. We're just not sure. It's a very fluid type of situation. So that's the concept about quarantine. And maybe Alex, now you can maybe talk about, intending parents that are waiting for the birth of their child and how the exemptions, could apply to them and the general process there.
So regarding the travel ban and the travel restrictions, I think the key distinction that we just need to make between the US, traveling from the US to Canada versus traveling from outside the US to Canada is that from the US, the test is, are you coming to Canada for an optional or discretionary reason? And so you don't need any special pre-authorization, pre-applications to the government. It's very much showing the border officials that you are coming for some sort of essential or non-discretionary reason. And we've had intended parents coming in, through land borders, by plane from the US. We've had no issues. We do prepare them very well, and they have all of the documents they need to show that purpose. And we've had some great experiences there. The difference with travel from outside of the US is that you do need an authorization. There's pretty much an absolute ban on travel from outside the US unless you fit into a specific exemption. So intended parents coming for the birth of their child will need to seek authorization from the government. And that's what Cindy was talking about, is the process that has been in place since very early on, and the government has recognized that as a not optional purpose of travel, and they've been facilitating those authorizations. I will say that there is an overlap between the two sets of rules for people who already have a Canadian child. And so if you're the parent of a Canadian, throughout this travel ban, travel restriction, you've been able to board a flight even from outside the US without an authorization. Now, I think this is an example of how fluid the situation is. In March, April, and May, those parents were able to board the flight without any issues, regardless of where their Canadian child was located. Very recently, the government has kind of changed the policy a little bit, and it's more emphasizing family reunification, meaning if your Canadian child isn't here or coming with you, even if you are a parent of a Canadian, which is an exemption, you probably won't be able to board the plane. So it's very important that these types of distinctions are looked at and recognized before you attempt to fly, because it may look like you're exempt, but you may actually need to get some authorization before you travel. So intended parents were good. I think, as Leia talked about, there's a bit of a lull on that now because of just the way that the cycle goes. And we have shifted some focus recently to donors and the ability to travel here during this ban. I'll say from the US, it's the same thing. You have to show that you're coming for a non-optional reason. So, coming to donate a gamete, I believe would be something that we can work with from the US. And Stephen, I think you can talk a little bit about what we've been doing for international, non-US travelers to see how they can be facilitated.
Sure. It's interesting. You kept hearing Alex say, that there's a, waiting for the birth of a Canadian child. There's always some sort of Canadian connection for people that are coming here for the delivery. When we're talking about donors, it's not as clear to the government, and therefore we have to make a request to them to show the reason why you are coming to Canada, and that being to donate either your egg or your sperm. And the government has to look at it to see, does it fall within perhaps a national interest issue? Does it fall within the compassionate issue? And we recently were involved in someone who was coming here as a donor for sperm, and you have to apply to the appropriate authorities inside of Canada to go ahead and get that special exemption. They were provided with that exemption, but again, the government, because they also have to look at the public safety, how long is the person going to be here? That person was provided with the authorization to come in, exempted from the travel ban, but for a very specific reason and for a very limited amount of time in order that they could complete the procedure and then return back home. But also, as Cindy stated, you have to look at the quarantine requirements of the clinic that you would be going to. So just because Alex and I are able to get you that special exemption if you're going to be a donor, it doesn't mean that you're exempted from the quarantine. So, you know, quarantine plans are very important throughout this whole process. You know, either coming from the United States, where Alex says you have to demonstrate to the official at the border that you are coming in for a non-discretionary purpose, and you must also have a proper plan for your quarantine. If you don't, then even though they say to you, hey, it's not a discretionary reason, we're going to let you, you know, come in. What's your quarantine plan? If you don't have one, they're not going to let you in. So it's very, very fluid. And, you know, it's interesting. We had someone who had received the special exemption to come here for the birth of their child. Everything was in order perfectly. Very, you know, the similar process that we prepared for so many of, you know, Cindy's clients and Leia's and everybody. We were all ready, and they go to the airport and they're actually in the taxi, and they get a text saying, all your documents are great. However, there's been a change in policy, and the border officials think that even though immigration has given you the authority to come in, the border official says they've changed the definition of who's allowed to come into Canada. Now, you know, immediately Cindy notified us and Leia told us about this. We went ahead and we contacted the government, and the government said, whoa, immigration doesn't understand why this has changed. They contacted the border officers, and we were able to fix that within, you know, 24 hours. But, you know, we can only, you know, express to you that you must prepare for everything, that everything is very, very fluid. And therefore, we as a group, again, the team wants to make sure that as much stress is taken off you throughout this whole process. And, you know, before we leave this webinar, I just want everyone to really remember that the situation is fluid. We do our absolute best to get you all the perfect documentation. And so far we're at 100% entry, so no issue. But it changes. And, you know, if it changes, you have to go through the stress of waiting to hear back from the immigration officer. And it's so important to work as a team and understand that everything is very, very fluid. And we want to make sure that it runs as best for you as possible.
And just, Stephen, as a final note on quarantine, if your clinic in Canada is able to offer you an alternative to, for example, having to quarantine for the full 14 days before completing your donation, you know, if there is a truncated period or a system in place for you to maybe donate outside the clinic, we should note that according to Canada's quarantine rules, you are allowed to leave Canada during your 14-day quarantine period. So you're not stuck here for 14 days. You know, you're responsible for staying in quarantine until you leave and, you know, wearing a mask on your way back to the airport. But you can, for example, come in for 6 days and then leave. So I think that's important to note.
And I wanted to add, and I wanted to wait until the lawyers had sort of shared the legal information, that with the uptick and hopeful rapid testing coming to Toronto, you know, I've spoken to Create Fertility Clinic, and we have come up with a plan that once people have, you know, had the rapid testing and have, you know, a negative COVID test, that they could complete the testing required to have the sperm sample and have their blood drawn once those results come back as negative, which, you know, as Alex was saying, would mean they would be able to leave Canada sooner than the 14 days, traveling directly back to the airport. But we are really hopeful that we will be able to, work with you as intended parents, along with Cindy's office and Stephen and Alex to create a safety net for you, so that you as intended parents have all of the information and all of the documentation in order to enter Canada. You'd have a clinic that would support you, having this rapid testing done and be able to, not remain in Canada for as long as previously thought. And so we are really hopeful that with all of this information and all of these processes that the lawyers are putting in place, you will be in safe legal hands, and then in safe medical hands with the clinic, and keeping Canadians safe and yourselves staying safe as well.
And can I also chime in before we go to Nir to talk about the amazing sperm kit option? I wanted to also address and have Alex and Stephen address the other exemption for applying for authorization to come here to support the surrogate, because we've had clients ask if they can come and be here for their surrogate before transfer, for the transfer, during the pregnancy, not for the birth, but throughout. And there is an exemption for that. You need authorization, so you do need the team. Alex and Stephen, would you like to talk a little bit about that one? Please.
Sure. It's, if you do have your surrogate's doctor in the clinic or licensed healthcare professional, it doesn't have to necessarily be a doctor, just a licensed healthcare professional who signs off on the fact that, your surrogate does require that support, then you can request authorization from the government to provide that support to her. It is a process, as Cindy mentioned, and the key thing is first obtaining that support from your clinic, understanding if they will support you in that way, and if they will, then it's a process that you do have to apply to the office from inside Canada. It's processed here, and it's it's great. You're able to do that. Yes. Anything you wanted to add, Stephen, before we hand it off to Nir?
Nope. Perfect.
Okay. Perfect. So now you'll hear from Nir Keren from Babies Come True, and thank you so much.
So hi everyone. With these great options that people have that Stephen and Sydney and Leia was talking about, I just want to provide with another alternative, and that is using Create Sperm Kit and the fact that you can basically do what we call a sperm at home process. So the sperm at home process is basically a way for us to get your sperm into Canada without involving any other clinics. So you really can do it in the comfort of your home. The way that it works is that once you decide to do that and work with us, you'll have to get some medical clearance, meaning you're gonna have to go and have some testing done in your home country. Once they're all clear, then we'll be able to send you a kit. We're actually gonna send you 2 kits. One kit will be a sperm kit, where you're going to deposit your sperm, which is basically a big container full of nitrogen that you'll be then freezing the sperm and putting it there. And another kit to do blood tests that will be done by any professional that can draw the blood that you will choose. And both of them needs to go back to Canada. So once you get the kit, you'll process the sperm deposit, and then you're gonna have a video with exactly instruction of how it's done. And then once you finish the process, which takes around 40 minutes, then you're just gonna put them in the big tank full of the nitrogen, and you will ship it back. For the bloods, you're gonna have to do the same thing, except you're gonna ship them back separately into to us in order that we'll be able to process both of them. So it's quite simple process. It's something that can be done in most countries that we can ship it. And it's a solution that only Create Fertility Center has. and it's a great solution. However, the solution that were offered here are definitely solutions that could be also an option for you if that is something that is that good for you. For us, we just want to make sure that we can do whatever we can in order to help you achieve your family goals. That's why we have the solution of the sperm kit and also the solution of other, the solution that was discussed here today. So if you have any questions about this whole process, or even for Stephen or Leia or Sydney, please feel free to bring them up right now and we can answer them.
Mir, I have a question.
Can I just bring everyone on screen? I just have a few questions from people.
Do we know which countries it will not be available for at this time?
So currently the one country that we know that it's not available is China, that we're not able to ship the sperm just because of their legislations.
Excellent. My question is, and this may have been covered, but we have an egg donor that lives outside of Canada. Will this exemption apply to our egg donor?
So Alex and Stephen and I are working on one right now for an egg donor to get her into the country for cycle monitoring and the retrieval. And there are a number of steps involved in doing that. Of course, she has to enter the clinic for the monitoring and for the retrieval. So at this time, there is a requirement of a 14-day quarantine for her. So she would be in Canada for a period of time. This particular donor is capable of doing that. And Alex and Stephen can talk a little bit about the exemption we're using or possible exemptions we're using to have this one work.
Yeah, so similar to the early days of the having intended parents travel, the government is currently looking at a few of our requests under various exemption categories. And the most promising one, which Stephen spoke about thus far, has been providing support for someone here in Canada. So the exemption of an egg donor traveling here from outside the US really hinges on whether or not the clinic is able to provide a support letter, and really whether a surrogate has been matched as well. There needs to be a Canadian component for that exemption. So we are working on, as Cindy mentioned, a more flexible exemption than the one we've had this initial success with, where you wouldn't need to have a Canadian connection yet. And that's something that we're hoping to be able to roll out in coming weeks.
Okay. The need trust to all coordinate together for that one, because you need the surrogate, you need the clinic, and there's a lot of administrative work, and Leia's team manages so much of the travel arrangements and all of those other components. The agency is critical in this.
My next question is, and I know it doesn't necessarily apply maybe to what we're talking about today, but it is, how does it work for, or has anything changed with surrogates traveling, a Canadian surrogate traveling to the US and coming back to Canada from a legal perspective?
Nothing has changed with respect to Canadians going to the US. We always encourage people to fly, because there seems to be a different test for people that are flying as opposed to driving. So we encourage you to fly to the United States, and there has been nothing changed. Then, of course, when you come back, then you're subject to the 14-day quarantine, the usual stuff that any Canadian would be subject to on the return.
Okay, perfect.
And in my experience, Leia, there hasn't been a surrogate who's been rejected going into the US.
Correct. And then, sorry, I'm just trying to read this question, and I'm just, okay. This question is from intended parents in France who have a surrogate who is 15 weeks pregnant. They want to know if the exemption that you mentioned, talking about supporting the person would work for them to come just to simply visit their surrogate throughout a pregnancy?
I think I know who we're talking about, and so I guess we're working on that.
Okay, so Stephen, is that going to be a thing?
We'd have to see the full facts, and we'd need, the support of the doctor, and, we'll have to see, because it's a, fact specific type of situation. But again, you would absolutely need the pre-approval before. There may be issues, as far as support goes to a Canadian, maybe there's a, medical issue that they need to be there to support, that type of stuff. So it really depends on the fact situation of why they're coming. But again, Lee, it's really, we're not coming to visit. Very important wording.
Okay, so what are they coming to do?
They're coming to support, to be part of this process, that type of thing.
Okay, and is that something that, and then the follow-up question to that is that something that your office can process for them in the way of these other?
Yes. Yep, absolutely.
And as Stephen said, the facts are really critical. So what is supporting a surrogate? And that's where we come into it with the agency as well, because, we're not immigration lawyers, Stephen and Alex, although I'm sort of becoming one, you're sort of becoming surrogacy lawyers.
Whoa.
Leia, I think you've become an honorary lawyer near you. So, but we need to work together, because writing out the definition of support is what's going to do it. I've had success now with one client coming in on that basis, and I have the requests of so many others now. So it's all new and very fluid. So you can't really try and do this on your own. It would be
okay. My last question is, we are intended parents wanting to travel from Australia. We have heard that Australia will potentially not let us leave. Stephen and Alex, can you help people with their country that doesn't want them to leave?
I would refer them back to Cindy, who has the experts there that she's been working with that help people. We could definitely help you with all of Canada and all the United States, but Australia's down under.
I'm happy to plug right now. Roman Danu of Far and Wide Migration Services is fabulous to work with. There are a number of lawyers, particularly Stephen Page, I work with in Australia, who help people. But Roman, he processes these for people, because it's really, really tough and creates so much anxiety.
Okay, thank you. Those are, let me just double check. I believe those are all of, I have one other question, and I think it's like no one has a crystal ball, but with talk today in the news about this, vaccine being, close to ready, do you, Stephen or Alex, see anything getting better really quickly with COVID and entrance into Canada?
Again, it's a crystal ball. I really don't think anything will start to settle down until the late spring or early summer, at least, because they've got the issues in the United States. Our borders are so fluid between the two of us if things do open up, and we'll have to see there. But they keep pushing our ban further and further and further down. Who would ever think, when the three of us met in March, April, that we'd be talking now?
Absolutely. And so, intended parents, in closing, we are going to be sending out this as a recording. So if you are watching this as a recording, you will have contact details for all of the members on our panel today, as well. If you are an intended parent with a surrogate who is currently pregnant and you have questions about the immigration process and traveling into Canada, Alex and Stephen will be able to take care of you there. If you have questions about a great clinic in Canada, Nero will be able to take care of that for you, and Cindy on the other legal pieces. So thank you everyone who joined us today. We are just so excited about the processes that are being put in place to ensure that people are able to access surrogacy in what I believe is the best jurisdiction for surrogacy for international clients. I may be biased, but you will be in good hands with all of these people. So thank you so much for attending our webinar, and we will hopefully never have to speak about COVID again on a webinar. So we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.